Today, I really want to talk about account-based marketing, right? I mean, what's happened with COVID over the last month or so is it's been devastating for many businesses, and for others, of course, it's certainly not been fun, right? Just about every business owner that I at least speak to, they're in some way hurt by this, whether they've had to let go of their sales teams or they've just had to had layoffs take place, pay cuts, et cetera. So probably a lot of us on this call are in that boat. So I just thought, why don't we take the opportunity then to really think about ways that we can market during COVID that's leveraging, I think, tailwinds versus headwinds. And so, when Linda and I were talking, we were just thinking, you know what, I think that account-based marketing and this digital account-based marketing approach could be practical for this morning's webinar. So with that being said, quick overview of this slide. Of course, I just talked to that, the old ways of marketing, unfortunately, just aren't going to be working anytime soon with COVID. So taking trade shows as an example, speaking to a lot of companies every day where, I literally spoke to a company yesterday. I mean, they're huge, but they had a $500,000 trade show budget that no longer exists, right? They're not going to trade shows anytime soon. And that's not just that one company. There's data coming in all the time on the marketing front that shows that 80% of trade shows and events canceled between March 1st and May 15th, right? 80%. And I'd argue that's probably dated, right? That was from a week ago, so it might even be closer to 100% at this point. And in terms of, I don't know about you and listening to the webinar, but oftentimes manufacturers, a large percentage of your budget is focused on trade shows, right? So, just looking at some numbers here, just the average, not even just with manufacturers, percentage of marketing budgets dedicated to trade shows can be up to 21%. And also, over half of your marketing budgets oftentimes are just dedicated still to just traditional marketing. And with what COVID has been difficult, right, with our budgets, is traditional marketing oftentimes now isn't going to work, right? Trade shows falls under that bucket, of course, of traditional marketing. And in addition to trade shows, right, we've got to just even be rethinking our sales approach. Right, there are companies that we're speaking with where they have outside salespeople where there's not, the old way of, as I like to say, sort of shaking hands and kissing babies and going to trade shows. That's come to a grinding halt, and so we now have to be thinking about, okay, instead of just throwing our arms up in the air, hands up in the air, and saying, okay, I guess we just have to wait this out. And see our sales pipelines diminish dramatically as a result. Instead, from my approach, let's just be thinking about other ways that we can pivot into new marketing channels and marketing approaches. And so that's where account-based marketing comes in. And the benefit, and I'm going to get into that now, what ABM is. ABM stands for account-based marketing, but the value of account-based marketing is, number one, it's not about just physically shaking hands or going to events. It is using digital and social channels, but it also can be done and is done in very, very targeted ways. So when we talk about traditional marketing, where I said a lot of that now is out the window, the old days of pre-COVID of just even inbound marketing, right? Everyone's talked about inbound marketing, which is of course still important, but you can no longer just in a very general way, get your message out there to a very wide audience and hope that someone then from an inbound perspective reaches out to you. I mean, nowadays, every dollar counts with marketing even more than ever. And so we want to be extremely targeted and proactive in our approach versus, again, just sort of spraying a message out there. And that's really what account-based marketing is. So today, we're really going to be talking about what it is. And from there, we're going to be focusing on how to actually carry out an account-based marketing campaign. And again, we're a bit rigorous here, right? So we're trying to give frameworks today that you can be leveraging within your own organizations. So I'm going to make sure that it's both high level, but also it's going to be hopefully very practical for you as well. So this is our agenda. I know I have probably about 50 minutes now or so to get through it, because again, I want to make sure I'm mindful of your time. And then if there are questions, Linda can be feeding them to me, as she said, or, we can have a Q&A at the end for a little bit. Okay. That being said, what is account-based marketing, right? It's ABM is really a strategy where sales and marketing teams work together, right, to target proactively, right, best fit, typically enterprise level accounts, right? So we're not going to use account-based marketing where we're targeting specific companies if it's a very small company. But if we're talking about, going after global accounts, 10, 50, 100, $500 million companies, account-based marketing nowadays is a perfect approach. Okay, so bottom line is, when you get back to you're not going to be in your office today, right, during COVID, but when you think about this, you should be getting your sales team together along with your marketing team. And you should really be starting to think about, okay, which accounts, now that we're not going to be able to just go to a trade show and shake hands with 100 companies overseas, which accounts do we really want to target? And, for what we do for our clients, we typically come up with a list of 100 companies, not 1,000 or 5,000. We just first even start with, 100 to, ranging between 100 and 500 companies. Okay. And once working with your sales team, you've identified those companies. You then really want to make sure that you're going very deep into those companies, right? So that's where, once you've identified the accounts, and I'm going to go over all of this in detail in future slides here, but high level, right? Once you've identified the accounts, you're then going to want to be profiling those accounts, where we're going to find the right decision makers in those accounts. We're then going to want to make sure we're creating very specific content for those accounts. And from there, we're going to then be leveraging marketing channels, which we'll go over, to actually launch these campaigns targeted to these 100 companies or 500 companies. And then we're going to make sure we put reporting in to measure the results. Okay, so that really is what account-based marketing is. It's a very precise way to be outreaching in very personalized methods to, again, a select number of companies that you want to make sure that you have top of mind awareness with. Okay. So let's talk about determining target audiences, right? That's the first step. Okay, and so my key takeaway, I want to try and have a couple key practical points for each slide if I can. Key takeaway here is you want to make sure that the accounts that you're targeting, if you can, have tailwinds at their backs versus headwinds, right? Because again, in a COVID world, there's probably a lot of companies that were attractive to you, in February and January, but they might not be as attractive anymore because they're in industries that have really been hit hard. So what we're doing for our own clients and for TribalVision is we're making sure that we're targeting industries that really have tailwinds at their backs, where they're either a benefactor in some way of COVID, or at least they're not as harmed as other industries. So here are some examples, right? That if you think about this, right, hand, body, soap cleaner manufacturers, of course, food manufacturers. I won't go down the entire list, but what we're doing with clients is we're saying, okay, yeah, we know these are your top 100, but it seems like those 30 out of the 100 aren't going to work anymore, at least for the next 3 to 6 months. Are there any other industries that you can be pivoting to a bit and making sure that you're getting in front of them? And that's actually, being fully transparent, that's what's helped my firm, TribalVision, right? So for TribalVision, we're going after the right manufacturers that are essential manufacturers that can still work. We're going after telehealth companies, right? We're making sure that our marketing is pivoting very quickly to industries that our services can still work into. So I would just challenge you to make sure that I know you don't think it's, of course, business as usual, but from a marketing perspective, really think about those top 100 accounts. That's probably going to be different than what you would be thinking about in January or February of this year. Okay, so yes.
Can I interrupt just for a second? So someone had a question that maybe you'll be getting to later, but the question was, how do you find the right person to get to? So you
Yeah.
target the company. How do you get to the right decision maker?
Yeah, that's great. So, yep, we're going to get into that probably in another slide or two. And if I haven't answered it, then feel free to just ask me that again, Linda. Okay, so that's, yep, great question. And so this is starting to answer the question. We want to make sure that once you have identified the companies, you want to then make sure that you're identifying both the decision makers and the influencers at each of the companies. Now, remember I said that this is 100 companies, 500 companies at most at first. We're not talking mass marketing. So as a result, you really do need to spend the time, right? Maybe it's not yourself. Maybe at TribalVision, we have an intern doing this, right? Where you can be, once they've been trained properly, they can be finding the right individuals at those companies that you think are really going to be interested in your outreach, right? So we like to say that in addition to the decision maker, they're also going to have people around them that can influence that person's decision. So we like to say at least target 3, sometimes 4 individuals at each of these companies. Okay, and you also want to make sure that for each of these individuals, there's going to be potentially different pain points, right? So again, let's just use a basic example. If I'm targeting a company, I'm going to target the CEO, let's just say, if it's not too large of a company. That individual's motivation to work with me is very different than a VP of marketing, where I'm trying to take work off of their plate, or VP of sales, where I'm just going to talk to them about how I can make them more money and make them a hero. Very different messages based on the pain points that they're facing at their company and their own objectives. So my point is, once you find those 3 to 4 individuals, you want to get to the point where you're even refined with your message, right? And this is where I said it's manageable because it's 100 companies or a few hundred companies. You want to be speaking to their own specific pain points at those companies or their own objectives, right?
So Chris, I'm going to follow up here on that point of how do you find that right person? And I know we struggle with this sometimes, but so I was going to say we use LinkedIn a lot to search a company and see who we can find.
Yep. So that leads me to this slide here, right? So in terms of practical tools, there are many. I've just put a few down, of course. LinkedIn is obvious, but a lot of companies, and maybe some on this webinar, maybe not, but a lot of companies that we work with, they say, oh yeah, no, I know about LinkedIn. We're using LinkedIn, but there's using LinkedIn and then there's really using LinkedIn. So just know that if you, for example, have a Sales Navigator account on LinkedIn, it costs about $100 a month. You can then be coming up with very targeted lists from LinkedIn that where you can even just target based on the title of the individual, their title on LinkedIn, right? Head of procurement, head of sales, head of marketing, whatever you know that title is that you want to be going after, you can easily come up with a very, very granular list for you to be outreaching to. And so a lot of companies, again, they use LinkedIn, but they don't understand how to use that filtering tool that LinkedIn has that can be really powerful. Okay, so that's number 1, Linda. All right, if you want to do sort of mass targeting, you would look at LinkedIn because you can very easily come up with a list of 500 within probably 30 minutes. If you really, you can base it on geography, SIC code, job title, annual revenue of the company, employee size of the company. Basically anything you can think of, LinkedIn is going to help you target, okay, on a business level. So that's sort of like coming up with a large list, targeted list. Now, if you wanted to get much more specific within that list, so you might say, Linda, okay, that's great, I have their LinkedIn, but what about their emails, right? So that's point number 2 here on this slide, is there are tools out there that are either free or very inexpensive that you can be using actually then to target and to find the email addresses of these individuals. So one is called hunter.io. So literally with hunter.io, you just download that in sort of like Google Chrome, where it's going to be up in your tab, your navigation, and you literally now can go onto any website, that you want to be targeting, and you right click on that website, and you'll find the email addresses that they find on that for that company. Is it perfect? No. I can tell you though that our clients use it all the time, and even if they can't find the individual at that company's email address, let's say it's a company with 1,000 employees, that's fine. But if you already found 10, if they showed you 10 of those email addresses and the naming convention is first initial, last name at that company, then you found your email, right? Because you'll then know, oh, it's ccianci@tribalvision.com because I found Rob Meyer is R. Meyer. So it must be Chris's first initial and then his last name. So hunter.io it can be really effective, just literally going onto websites and finding email addresses. Another is what's called Lead IQ. And with Lead IQ, you can go onto someone's LinkedIn profile and again, right click and you'll be able to find their email address. Is it 100% of the time? No. Is it a large percentage of the time? Yes, it is. So my point is you can then, as a salesperson or even as a marketer, right? If you really want to try and outreach to someone with a very custom targeted message that's one-to-one, these tools can be really powerful. Not even powerful, not powerful, they're practical. Okay, and then third is, I don't know if you've heard of ZoomInfo before. It's powered by now Discover.org. Discover.org recently purchased ZoomInfo, where you can then be tying into a database of a lot of records where you can then also be building your own larger campaigns that's more than sort of the one-offs. Now, what I'll say is you've got to make sure that these emails really are, if I were you, if we're talking international right now, global, you've got to be careful because you've got to look at what's called GDPR. And if you don't know enough about GDPR, it's all about privacy. And in Europe specifically, you've got to be very careful. You can leave yourself exposed. So ZoomInfo, typically we would just use if you were to be targeting US companies in a more scalable way, right? Where you can be sending out hundreds of emails, for example, on a weekly basis, but you've got to be very careful if you're targeting outside the US. I threw it in there because I think it's important where if we are talking the United States as part of your marketing efforts, not just global, I wanted to put that in there. Lastly, just know that you really do want to make sure you adhere to best practices where that email list that you do put together, you can then be using tools such as NeverBounce and datavalidation.com, where you'll be able to make sure that that email address is valid and it doesn't end up hurting your list or putting you into a spam folder. So I think those are two tools that you can be cleaning up the emails that you have gathered. Okay, so point is, once you've targeted those companies, you've found those companies, you can use a combination of LinkedIn and these tools that we're talking about then to at least be able to outreach both through LinkedIn and through email. And by the way, more than just through email and LinkedIn, because through LinkedIn and also through Facebook, you can be building targeted lists through those platforms if you have email addresses where you can then be what's called retargeting these same individuals on those platforms. So when they're on Facebook, for example, they'll be able to see a piece of your content. You can set that up directly in those platforms once you've gathered this information. So it's more than just an email outreach, and it's more than just a LinkedIn in-mail that we're talking about here. Okay, we've talked about this a little bit, and again, I'm probably not going to get through all the slides, so I want to be mindful of which slides I go deep on and which ones I think I've already covered. So again, we've already talked a little bit about this here. You got to make sure you have a specific value proposition to your decision makers that you're targeting and also your influencers. Okay, so ABM, account-based marketing, right now that we've gathered our list, right, we've figured out, okay, we found email addresses, LinkedIn profiles, we're able to really make sure that we can outreach to them now. You know, how are we thinking through this? We've got to think first about content, right? Most times, just know that account-based marketing approaches fail or they underperform because companies aren't thinking about coming up with very specific content. They just are using their one workhorse piece of content and thinking that that's going to work. If you really want to do this really well and get sort of an A+ here for the teacher, you've got to be thinking about content, because I always say, if I'm going to go fishing and if I don't have good bait at the end of my fishing rod, I'm not going to catch a fish. And the same thing, of course, with marketing, and specifically with account-based marketing. You're going to really have to think through what content do you want to put at the end of your fishing rod, so that when you do reach out to these individuals at these companies, it's something that they'll actually react to. And I'm not saying 75% are going to react to your outreach. I'm saying, can you get it to the point where there's a 10% response rate, from a 2% response rate? So think through content. I put this slide together just so you can see the different types of content, right? So there's what we call gathered intel, right? So maybe you have proprietary data. Maybe there's something that's, very technical, very specific, that these audiences that you're outreaching to would really want to know about, right? Typically engineers. So you should be thinking about talking to your technical group at your company and saying, what can we put together that really could be somewhat proprietary, that could be very valuable for someone to want to know about. Number 2 is, think about repurposing content, right? You could say, yeah, I only have a 1-person or 2-person marketing team. We don't have time to develop 50 pieces of content, especially during COVID. Agreed, right? So think about the content that you already have, and can you then be repurposing that content, right, for this type of approach, right? Number 3 is new content, right? So what I'd argue is, if you are looking to target, that there's, let's say, a few industries that you're going to be targeting with your account-based marketing approach. Make sure that you maybe even just refine with minor updates the content that you've done specific to that industry. So for example, I might come up with a piece of content for account-based marketing. Well, with just some minor tweaks, I can then just be coming up with account-based marketing for manufacturers. And then I can have minor tweaks for account-based marketing for professional services companies, right? You can tweak your workhorse content and refine it to specific audiences that you want to be going after. Okay, next, then new content. Okay, and then again, there's also what we're calling social proof. So for social proof, what really that is we love anything that can be that you can be harnessing of third-party validation, right? Case studies, client video testimonials, just regular client testimonials, success stories. Social proof is so important right now, especially for account-based marketing campaigns, because there's a lot of these campaigns going on right now, especially since there's no trade shows anymore. And so you've got to stand out. And typically you don't stand out by saying, look at how great I am, but instead you talk about either relevant content, right? Like we talked about in these last few pillars, or social proof of what others are saying about you from their industry. Okay, so again, point of this slide, make sure for your account-based marketing campaigns, you're thinking about getting good bait at the end of that fishing rod for yourself. You also, if you want to take a little bit harder look at content, just know and practical look, okay, you want to be thinking about, okay, what type of content, right? Like actual sell sheets, landing pages, videos, and then you should be thinking about, what we're calling top of funnel, middle of funnel, and bottom of funnel. So let me just take a quick step back and explain. So let's just say that you're now outreaching to that company, the 3 individuals at that one company we just identified. Now you've got to be thinking about, okay, well, what content do I first want to serve them? And then once they've clicked on something, they then go to my middle of my funnel, my sales funnel. What do I want them to see once they get to my middle of my sales funnel? And then at the very end, once I still see engagements, what do I want them to see at the bottom of my funnel, right? So not to get crazy here, but just to be clear, you can't just come up with, again, that one workhorse piece of content. You want to be thinking about the types of content for the different stages of your sales pipeline, your funnel. Okay, because at first, you're potentially not going to want to just start off with a white paper right off the bat, right? That's too much. Someone's not going to want to read a 5-page white paper that you put together. You want to have something that's, a little bit higher level to gain someone's interest, right? That could be, again, driving someone to a landing page to learn a little bit more, showing them a quick 30-second video. But once they have shown interest, you might want to go deeper into a different type of piece of content, like a white paper or a testimonial. So you should be thinking about your funnel, and you should be then mapping the different types of content to the different stages of your funnel. Here's just another example here, right, where, and this is, so if you notice here, we're talking about the different types of content, right, for the different stages of the funnel. Here we're talking about the different channels, and we're going to get into this next, right, the channels you can be using, but the different channels that you should be using to deliver that content. Right, so this is a sample account-based marketing workflow where we're calling it engage, then nurture, and then you hand it off to sales, right? Engage typically leverages email, display, LinkedIn, and others that I'll go over. Nurture, right, can be also including retargeting efforts and even direct mail. While that might not work now in COVID, it will eventually again. And so my point of this slide is, you've got to make sure that you have content that can be married to the marketing channels that you're going to be using. So now we're going to talk about marketing channels. Again, back to sort of this full funnel approach, right? So top of funnel, middle of funnel, where someone's shown interest, and then bottom of funnel, where you're trying to make sure that you're actually closing that piece of business. So, and this is where, Rob, you can jump in the next few slides if you'd like a little bit here, my colleague Rob.
Sure.
But ultimately, in terms of top of funnel ABM marketing channels, right? Typically the workhorses, right, are email automation, right, where we're sending those 300 individuals that I talked about earlier. We're sending them an email that's very relevant. We're also targeting them through LinkedIn. Right? That could either be a connect outreach on LinkedIn, or it could also be through what we call sponsored ads, which we'll get into. And you can also be targeting through YouTube, right? So when someone jumps on YouTube today and they're looking for a video, well, you could have a 15-second spot that's right in front of them that they can see, or a 30-second spot for them to learn a little bit more about your offering. Then there's middle of funnel marketing channels, right? Where again, email is still a workhorse, but if you notice, this is where we're going to get into retargeting. And I have Facebook in there also, because you can do Facebook retargeting in this middle of funnel, which Rob might get into. And then it's bottom of funnel, right? So once we brought them through from them to show some interest to then getting more engaged with you, learning more and more about you with new pieces of content, then you bring them to the bottom of your funnel, where nowadays, especially in a remote virtual environment, right? I've also added, if you don't know these tools, we'll go over them with you. There's a platform called Client Point, which is very cool, which is really virtual sales at this point, where right when someone's very interested, you now want to be, sending them proposals in maybe an online platform way, sending them your proposal even through video. That's where Vidyard comes in. Using Zoom, of course, like we're doing today. So bottom of funnel is more tool and platform heavy to try and convert that piece of business. Okay, so that's high level. If we're talking about an account-based marketing approach, you want to be thinking about top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. You want to be thinking about your content in those ways. And then you want to be thinking, of course, about marrying that right piece of content with the right medium, right? That right marketing channel to lead someone down that path to close. So if you notice, I'm not just talking about putting together an account-based marketing campaign to identify and just blast out a piece of content. That's somewhat one-dimensional. I'm trying to just get this a little bit layered here, where once you do have that piece of content in front of them, that's not it. That's just the beginning. You then have to make sure that there's other content in other channels where you're hitting them in 4 or 5 different ways, right? Where you're everywhere, where you're then, building frequency and building trust with them for for them to actually then raise their hand and say, yes, I'm interested. So probably the greatest compliment I get as a firm for TribalVision is when I do talk to those that we're targeting, because we also are targeting about 3,000 companies. They say, usually in the first call, they say, you guys are everywhere. Like, I see you everywhere. I see you on LinkedIn. I see you with an email. I see you when I'm on Facebook. I'm seeing you on my Google searches. I'm seeing you everywhere. You guys must be huge. And I say, no, we're not huge at all, actually. We're just taking a very targeted approach where we're using multiple channels with multiple pieces of content to build top of mind awareness with you, with where you are in your buyer's journey. And that's really what this whole presentation is about. Okay, so Rob, I'm thinking if you want to just go, Rob, again, works with me at TribalVision. He's been in the trenches, campaigns. I'm thinking he's probably more practical than I am, even just to talk a little bit more in depth about these top of funnel channels. And don't go crazy, Rob. We're already at
Sure. I see the
I
see the time. One note, actually, if you want to go back to the previous slide, though, one note I did want to make here is just with all of these, the reason that you want to have this broad mix of marketing channels is that let's just think of a hypothetical scenario where you sent Target a couple of emails, but they didn't engage with those. You're not putting all of your eggs in that basket of, if they don't see my email, then we're not going to get a conversation started, because you're also hitting them with sponsored ads on LinkedIn, sponsored video on YouTube, so on and so forth. That provides you a larger number of opportunities to get in front of those people that you want to start a conversation with. So anyway, I did want to call that out up front here, but yeah, we can go back to the top of funnel slide then.
Yeah, and one other point I would make also, where this, hopefully you might be overwhelmed right now. Some people on the webinar are saying, my God, there's just so much here. There is, but just know that this is also enabling you to efficiently spend your marketing dollars, where you're probably not going to have as much of a marketing budget right now as you were in January. I mean, smart companies will. I mean, smart companies might even double down on their marketing if they can. I mean, most companies can't right now. But my point is, we're putting together these types of ABM campaigns with all of these channels where we're not talking about $100,000 campaign, right? We're talking about, thousands of dollars, not tens of thousands of dollars, right? So if you're targeted just to 500 or 1,000 individuals, you can look massive with the very small marketing spend. I think that's an important point to make during COVID. So yeah, Rob, if you want, take it away here a little bit with a little bit more depth on a few of these channels.
Yeah, so with the top of funnel channels, I mean, like Chris said, I mean, this is really just geared at building awareness for your brand. So getting them aware of both of your company name, your offerings, etc. So the first way that and I think it's the workhorse of all of this, is going to be email automation. And I saw there was a question popped up a minute ago around email automation. Absolutely. The automated emails is going to be the primary driver to get content out to your target companies. But in addition to that automated email, you're also going to be supplementing that with LinkedIn sponsored ads and sponsored in-mail. So with the sponsored ads, this gives you the opportunity to take your piece of content, put it up on LinkedIn, and here's the interesting thing of why the LinkedIn sponsored ads are so valuable. You have the opportunity to build a target audience within LinkedIn that it's going to then send your ad to. So you do this by basically the email list that you build for the email automation step. You then just upload that straight into LinkedIn and then launch that campaign. And once it's live, those people that are in your automated email list, when they go on LinkedIn, they're going to get hit with that corresponding ad that you build out in LinkedIn. And what you ultimately want to do is have that same piece of content that you're pushing in your email to also be featured on LinkedIn. So like I said before, if you don't get a chance to get in front of them on email, you do have a chance to get in front of them on LinkedIn. But also, if you get in front of them in email, they see your piece of content, they think, that's interesting, but not right now. but you sort of pique their interest. And then they come over to LinkedIn, they see the same thing, either in a sponsored ad or in a sponsored email. Then they're thinking, wait, yeah, there that is again. I really did think I should read that. They click into it, and now you've got them over to your landing page with your piece of content, and they're engaging with you. And really the same thing goes with YouTube. It's just going to work a little bit different, where instead of having like a piece of like hard content, like a PDF or something like that, you've got a video. But the same idea holds, where YouTube is basically functioning as another opportunity for you to get in front of those individuals and start to get them seated where they understand who your company is and what value you can provide them. And really you get that conversation started by providing that piece of valuable content.
Right. That's great, Rob. So yeah, just imagine, right, those 300 individuals that we're talking about, let's just use that as the number. They get an email, they're on LinkedIn, they're seeing you on LinkedIn, they jump onto YouTube, they see a similar but different piece of content, right? A video piece of content on YouTube. It's building awareness in a very targeted way with those 300 individuals. Okay. And again, Rob's already talked to this a little bit, so I'm going to keep going here, Rob, because
I think we hit all these.
Yeah, maybe you talk a bit more about the automation platforms. This might be practical for people.
Yeah, definitely. Since we did see that question around email automation as well, but these are a few of the different platforms that we recommended, and I think that this really this is really the whole scale of level of platform you can go with. I mean, you've got the Marketo here, which, I mean, Marketo is the Rolls-Royce of marketing automation platforms. I don't necessarily recommend that if you're just starting out with ABM, you need to go all in and put a Marketo in place, but that is an option. A lot of times to start out account-based marketing campaigns, we like to recommend PersistIQ. You see that in the middle. PersistIQ is great because, and you've probably seen these yourself in your inbox, but PersistIQ is strictly a plain text email automation platform. So using the plain text, you're basically able to put together an email that looks like it came straight from your inbox, rather than an HTML heavy designed out marketing email that might turn somebody off. It looks like it's a one-to-one email that you sent directly to an individual. Apollo, think of Apollo as like that's not Marketo level, but is great for sending out large quantities of email if you're looking at large targets. And then MailChimp wouldn't have been on this list maybe 6-8 months ago, but they have added automation into their platform, which has made MailChimp a viable option for you on the marketing automation front as well.
Yeah, and Rob, what is just to give everyone an idea of cost, right? It's price. So I mean,
Yep.
PersistIQ, that's very inexpensive, right? What are we talking about a month?
PersistIQ runs about $60 a month per seat, and by seat, I mean that's really just the salesperson that's going to be sending out those emails. So if you have one guy doing ABM, then you just need one PersistIQ seat. So it's about $60 a month, which is a steal. I think MailChimp tracks around the same price with the others. I mean, Marketo, you're going in with you're doing like an annual contract, and it's highly negotiated. But SalesFlow, ActiveCampaign, those are both around $100 a month. So on the cheap side, PersistIQ and MailChimp are your way to go.
Yeah, exactly. So for larger organizations, right, if we're talking about someone who's already very sophisticated with account-based marketing, has a very deep list that they're going to be outreaching to in the tens of thousands, then Marketo might be the right fit, right? It's like, as Rob said, the Rolls Royce, but you're talking thousands of dollars a month in spend just on Marketo, whereas those that are wanting to walk before they run, PersistIQ, which we've used for many of our clients, works just fine.
Yep. One thing, actually, I left this out, but is worth noting as well. With Active Campaign, you saw that in the bottom right corner. If you don't have CRM in place, Active Campaign does have, it's stripped down, but they do have a CRM in the platform. So you can be tracking all of your lead activity right from within Active Campaign, opposed to having to bolt one of these platforms onto an existing CRM, or if you don't have a CRM at all, Active Campaign can be a great resource for you.
Yeah, and a CRM is a customer relationship management tool, right? That ultimately, that's what you use as your database for outreach. If you have a sales team. One point I'll just make here before Rob digs in a bit more is, so just to be clear, right? When we're talking about top of funnel, that's building awareness. And then if someone has some type of action at all, right, with you, they're clicking on the link, they're clicking on the sponsored post, there's some action that they take with your top of funnel campaigns. That then brings that lead to what we're calling middle of funnel. So just to be clear, if you're wondering, I don't understand what's middle of funnel versus top, there has to be some action that took place up front for someone to show some type of interest with their hand being waved, for us to then be talking about middle of funnel. So as Rob said, email automation, that's still the workhorse, of course. But also, if you notice here, maybe for the sake of time, do you want to just talk a little bit about retargeting? Maybe go here, then Rob, talk a little bit more about retargeting, because some people, and not just high level, but maybe an example of a retargeting ABM campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that top of funnel approach, we mentioned that you're going to have that piece of content, that lead magnet that's going to pique interest, get your target over to your landing page. Once they get over to that landing page, you're going to have tracking pixels installed on. And that's, really, it depends on which channels you want to do retargeting on. But the big three are going to be your Facebook, your LinkedIn, and your Google ads. And with that tracking pixel in place, once an individual lands on that landing page that you've set up for that top of funnel piece of content, you are then able to move them over to those mid-funnel channels, the mid-funnel remarketing, where the messaging is basically going to change. Where in this instance, no longer do they not know who you are. They're aware of your brand. They're aware of your offerings. And actually, you're trying to coax them along down the buyer journey. So really, with the retargeting, the purpose of retargeting is to just simply keep you and your organization top of mind as they're thinking more and more about the offerings that they read about. Now, on the previous slide, we did speak a little bit more to the types of content that you put there, but really the idea is that, sorry, Chris, it was way earlier in the deck, doesn't matter. But yeah, the idea is that at this point, now that you've piqued their interest, now you can serve them ads that are highly targeted around the specific proof points that you put together that you recognize are going to resonate with that company.
Yeah. And what are some examples? I know you said it very briefly, Rob. You want to talk a little bit about, like, how would someone retarget? Like, what channels and how would that work?
Right. So, the big thing is going to be having those, like I said, having those retargeting pixels installed on your landing page. And then once somebody hits that landing page, they're then going to be retargeted ads once they land on Facebook, Google, LinkedIn.
Exactly.
That's really where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, exactly. So just know, again, once retargeting, and you can set this up. How would you set it up, Rob? Right. So this would be right in Google Console. How would you set up retargeting if they said, all right, how do I even get started with this?
Oh, sure. No, I understand the prompt. Yeah, so the process, it's pretty straightforward. Once you have your advertising account set up on your LinkedIn, your Facebook, same in Google Ads, you'll just download. It's a very short piece of HTML script that you can pass over to your web developer. This is an add-on that takes about 30 seconds to do, but basically they'll install this tracking pixel. Like I said, it's a little snippet of HTML script. They'll just add that into your landing page. And then once that's installed, what happens is that any individual that hits your landing page, that platform has then added a cookie onto that person, recognizing, okay, this is a person that's on the page that we're interested in, and now they're going to be served this set of ads that you've built out. So really it all happens behind the scenes. The only step that you have to make sure that you do is install those pixels. Right. Once the pixel is there though, everything else happens basically behind the scenes. In terms of the email piece with the automated email, the trick here is that you're going to have a workflow built out for your top of funnel campaign. And that's going to be anywhere from 3 to 10 different emails that are all going to be top of funnel focused, just trying to build awareness. But once a person engages with one of those top of funnel emails, they're then going to automatically, because remember it's automated email, they're going to automatically be set up to be removed from the top of funnel campaign and added into the mid funnel campaign, which is going to have completely different messaging and different content. But it all happens basically seamlessly behind the scenes if you've set up both your automated email as well as your retargeting.
Perfect. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah,
and then,
of course.
So bottom of funnel. So this is interesting, right? With technology, with where it is today, there's opportunity really to be closing deals at this point online, right? Which we need to, given COVID. And so we just thought, instead of just telling you the typical bottom of funnel channels, we thought, why don't we at least give you a couple nuggets of how you actually can be converting now these individuals in a very digital way into a deal. So Rob, do you want to just focus maybe just on client point for a second, and maybe I know we talked about it in the bottom here for sales communications, client point and Vidyard a little bit, and what they should know about these two platforms and tools that can help convert business with these ABM campaigns?
Yeah, so really with the sales communication piece and the bottom of the funnel, at this point, since everybody is really just working remotely and that's it, and besides an email or maybe a random video call, you're not really having that personalized interaction with prospects. That can actually just lead to deals that go nowhere because you don't have that that personal connection. And honestly, it's platforms like these two that Chris just called out, Client Point, Vidyard. Those can both give you honestly, it's not going to be the same thing as stepping into somebody's office, going into their conference room, etc. But this can provide you some semblance of a personalized interaction with your prospects so that they feel like, okay, yes, I connect with this person. I understand their organization. I want to work with these guys. So on the Client Point side, best way to think about this is that it's an end-to-end pitch to signed deal experience, where basically everything from, like we're doing right now, the video call, everything from your video calls to sharing assets or whatever, that come out of your prospect calls, to actually sending out a contract or an agreement, that is all housed within the Client Point platform. And it is all consistently branded so that, from end to end, all your digital communications look consistent. But then also you have the opportunity to customize some of those pieces so that it feels like it was actually built out for them and it's not just part of some, larger digital effort. Same thing goes for Vidyard. This is a piece that we use at TribalVision a lot, where basically, and actually, shameless plug, if you check out TribalVision's recent LinkedIn posts, you'll see we use this Vidyard piece to basically go over one of our blog posts. But basically what it allows you to do is if you want to, like, let's say, walk through a document with a prospect, what you can do is with Vidyard, pull up that document on your screen, record your screen, but then it'll also populate a video window where you can see the individual that's speaking. So in this case, you would see me in the bottom corner along with the document that I'm walking you through. And I can, like, speak to the specifics that are in that document. And basically, I mean, it sounds so simple, but just that little extra personal touch does make it feel like, oh, okay, they are engaged with me. They did put together this video. They have walked me through all of the specifics of our agreement. I feel good about this. I want to press forward. And, you know, taking the place of, you know, what would be a meeting in a boardroom or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we found it to be very powerful with conversions, where it's just this more humanizing digital approach where even if you're presenting a proposal to an overseas opportunity, they can actually, as Rob said, see you on video, walking them through that proposal or walking them through that agreement, you know, with that agreement right on your screen at the same time. So, you know, just tried to give you a couple nuggets here at the bottom of your funnel where when someone does raise their hand, either domestically or overseas, you have a much higher probability of closing them in today's COVID world. And lastly, we're good here on time. So wrapping up here, last couple minutes, just know that there's also robust reporting that can take place also with your account-based marketing campaigns, right? So just make sure if you do this, you really want to put the reporting in place to see if it's working or not and where you can be improving. So, you know, we just put a few statistics, of course, whether it's number of, you know, cold emails sent, if we're talking about your automation campaigns, to what those open rates and click-through rates are. You can do the same thing basically for every channel, right? Whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's YouTube, whether it's, you know, anything that we just have talked about. You should certainly be putting together basic reporting to see if this is actually delivering or not delivering for you and your sales team. And so last slide here, or second to last slide, I think this is just an example. We just grabbed one from a campaign we're running for one of our clients right now, right? But you can then see by channel, you know, and you can also do it by, you know, where they are in the funnel, you know, what your actual statistics are, which is hugely important, right? And eventually, right, if you're interested, we can give you benchmarks on all this to see if you're actually doing well or not doing well. What's a good open rate? What's a good click-through rate? You know, what should we be expecting for top of funnel marketing qualified leads for a campaign of 500 individuals that we're targeting? You know, there's benchmarks throughout all of this, but ultimately, you want to make sure that there's reporting on all of this, because if not, then you're just shooting in the dark and hoping that it works. Do you have anything to add to that, Rob? Or
I think the biggest thing with the reporting is just know that this is the robust reporting is the best way to know if there are specific pieces of content that you have that are performing well. If there are emails that are performing well, emails that are not performing well, this is the way to zero in on, okay, this works and this is what we should be pushing out, and this, maybe we need to rework the copy in this email because it's not resonating the way that, you know, emails 3 through 4 are, or something
right.
like that. So just think of reporting as like the key to figuring out, okay, this is where we're actually drumming up interest and this is what needs to be reconsidered.
Yeah, great. And here's our final slide, everyone. So just know, we just thought we've already talked about some of these, but if you do want this presentation, we can provide it to you, of course, where you can just, in just one final slide, you know, see some of the workhorse tools and platforms that we've talked about today for you to be looking into a little bit further. So with that, I just wanted to say again, thank you. Any other questions, Linda? I think we're hitting it at 9:59 here. So
what a perfect timing. That was great.